Hi there, Coach Daniel here, and welcome to Ask Daniel number 54. Hope you're doing really well. We have 4 emails to go over, and of course, any live comments as well. I'll be more than happy, of course, to answer any live questions. So before we get started, as always, nothing here is medical advice, just general thoughts and comments that I hope will help anyone that's tuning in. And first, I want to share an important message from our permanent partner, BedTyme. The sleep coaching app is now available for Android and iOS. It has a really nice curriculum and a built-in coach, which happens to be myself. So definitely check it out. I think it's really good. And that said, let's jump into a couple of emails here. I want to share my screen with you. I have actually added a new thing that I hope you will find helpful. I just literally came to think of this like 5 minutes ago. And this is like this kind of legend here that has predisposing, precipitating, perpetuating factors and sleep efforts. I think that will help as we move forward and go over emails to kind of identify these kind of common threads. And then yellow is just something that I think is of interest. So first of all, here is an email from Kevin that came in a few days ago. Kevin, I meant to answer this Friday. Sorry, I didn't get to it that time. We'll talk about it now, of course. The title of this email was Sleep Onset Insomnia, and it came in 4 days ago, and Kevin wrote the following. Hi, Daniel. Since our last communication, my sleep gradually improved. And by the way, that was January of 19, so that was quite a while ago. My sleep gradually improved over the year to the point that I slept well almost every day for 6 months, despite tons of personal stress I faced last year. And I highlighted that because I thought it was really important to point out that there was this improvement. Always good to highlight the positives. Now, however, since the end of April, I had suffered from tinnitus and my sleep started to deteriorate. Now my tinnitus subsided, but my sleep is worse than ever. My sleep problem is still sleep onset insomnia. After a week of sleeping 1 to 2 hours a night, I got panic attack and doctor treated me with clonazepam. And after a week of clonazepam, my panic attack completely subsided and I was able to get decent amount of sleep with clonazepam during the week. Now I'm off clonazepam for a week, but my sleep is still very bad. Despite for a whole week, I practiced sleep hygiene and stimulus control I learned from a CBTI course years ago. I sit in my bed and I meditate. I do breathing exercises when I don't fall asleep for 20 minutes. And I repeat this many times. I could do it for 4 hours before I finally am able to get 2 to 3 hours of sleep. And then I can't fall asleep again because it's morning. My time in bed is 7 to 8 hours because on average I sleep 6.25 hours. Due to my recent panic attack, I could average only 5 hours. What options do I have and what do you suggest for me on my current situation? Thanks, Kevin. Well, first of all, Kevin, thanks so much for reaching out. Really appreciate the opportunity to answer this email. And again, highlighting the first thing in yellow here, it is super encouraging that you did well. And that I think something that's super important here is to use that knowledge that you slept well despite tons of personal stress for 2 reasons. One of them is it's evidence that there's nothing wrong with you, nothing broken inside, no hormonal problem, no neurotransmitter problem. There's nothing like that. You can sleep. There's nothing wrong with you. That's important for everyone out there. But Kevin, you have like the solid evidence. Number 2, despite tons of stress, that shows you that having stress doesn't have to mean that you have trouble sleeping. And which is like that should even more, build up that kind of like baseline sleep confidence, the knowledge that you can sleep even during times of stress, on your own. So that's a little bit of just encouragement there. That I think you can use this information, as encouragement again. Now, this magenta color here, I used as, you can check it here, precipitating factors. And a precipitating factor, as the name implies, is anything that like triggers a period of sleeplessness, a period of sleeping less. And pretty much anything you can think of can trigger sleeplessness. For example, tinnitus, like a health problem or health concern, And the important thing with these precipitating factors is that, a thing like tinnitus, going through menopause, hormonal changes, loud noises, construction in the neighborhood, a neighbor's cat, anything like that can cause you to have trouble sleeping. And the important thing here is that that in itself is normal. That in itself is normal. When you have a disruption or a stress or something like that, a weird thing going on, you're supposed to sleep less for a while. Think about it from like this big picture, evolutionary perspective. If you're living outside there in the wilderness and for some reason you're concerned and worried that something's going on, you should sleep less because you should be on the lookout for a potential predator that's out to get you. So acute insomnia, like insomnia just after something happened, is completely normal, and you may think, well, that doesn't really help me much, but you'll see that that is actually very helpful to know, because as we continue to reading, my tinnitus subsided, my sleep is worse than ever. This is where it gets like, into the next step of like perpetuating factors in sleep efforts. The thing is that if you don't react to the lack of sleep that happens immediately after like a stressor, and when I say immediately, I mean like the day after, the 2 days, like it could be a couple of weeks, even depending on what stressor it is, right? But if you don't react to that lack of sleep will actually go back to where it was before. The problem becomes when your brain starts identifying the loss of sleep as a problem. It's like, oh my gosh, something's going on. You're sleeping very little. Now we got to do something about it. And that's when we get to the next color here, which is a purple here, perpetuating factors. My sleep is still very bad despite the whole week I practice sleep hygiene and stimulus control. So sleep is very bad, and you're doing this like sleep hygiene. I'm imagining like keeping the room dark, keeping it cool, not watching TV before you go to bed and things like that, which seem very sensible because those are things we always are told you should do. But in reality, what they do is this: they reinforce the brain's thinking that there's something wrong. The brain's thinking your lack of sleep is abnormal. You got to do something about it. You keep the bedroom a little bit cooler. Nothing happens. You try another thing. Nothing seems to work. In reality, none of those things, keeping it cool, keeping it dark, not eating, blah, 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 none of them can make you sleep. And when they seem to fail, your brain starts thinking, oh my God, there's really something going on. I have to try harder. And that now you have these perpetuating factors. You had lack of sleep, right? You get worried about it. You try to do something. You don't sleep anymore. You get more worried. You try even harder, and you don't sleep more. And then now you're starting to have chronic insomnia, like real problems. You have this perpetuating cycle of things like that. And sleep efforts is a big part of that. Sleep efforts, anything you do, hoping that will make you sleep. And we read a lot of them here. And that's why I use this other color, which is like a pink color here for sleep efforts. I sit in bed and I meditate. I do breathing exercises. Those are classic sleep efforts. You're like meditating, like hoping like, okay, I have to calm down. I have to make myself calm. I have to sleep. Or you're like, I'm breathing in. I hope I can sleep. I hope I sleep. The more you try to sleep, the less sleep you get. It's like the most basic insight. The more you try to sleep, the less sleep you get. And you try this for like hours, for 4 hours, and then finally you sleep. And the tricky thing there, it can seem like, you tried so hard and then you slept. It can seem like you only slept because you tried so hard. In reality, it was when you finally, after 4 hours, where like your body was like kind of giving up, like I can't try anymore. I can't do any more meditation. I'm just kind of giving up on this thing. And then you finally fall asleep. But it's tricky because it can seem like you have to try to get at least a little bit of sleep, when the reality is you have to try less to sleep more. You have to try less to sleep more. So those are some, I think, really important insights here. And one more thing that I highlighted here was the 6.25 hours. Whenever I see something like really detailed like that, I think, okay, this person is probably kind of tracking their sleep, checking the time, trying to figure out how much sleep they're getting, which also seems very sensible. Like whenever we have a problem, we like to keep track of it. But insomnia is driven by tension. The more we try to keep track, the more we want to get sleep, etc., the more problem sleeping we get. So I think, and so starting with like, okay, what should you do here? First thing that comes to mind, starting at the last thing we talked about, was try to not monitor sleep so much. If you're using a tracker or if you're checking the time at night, try not to do that. That will really help you. Like not knowing the time seems scary, but that's a part of kind of retraining your brain that there is nothing to worry about. There is no real threat there. You have to, stop those kind of behaviors that reinforce the brain's idea that there is a problem, that there is a threat. Number one. Number two here, I I expected some other question here, but my time in bed is 7 to 8 hours. I think that sounds very reasonable. Maybe err towards like 7 hours, but 7 to 8 hours is good. I think it's good to have a pretty rigid wake up time, like you get out of bed, the same time every morning, regardless of how little or how much you slept. That's always good. And the reason that's important is that you're avoiding this thing where you're like, oh, I only slept 2 hours. Now I have to catch up. And whenever you do that kind of chasing sleep, trying to catch up on sleep, you're again reinforcing the brain's idea that lack of sleep is a problem, it's a threat, it's unacceptable, etc. So having a pretty rigid wake up time is good. Spending about 7 hours in bed, I think, is good. But again, I want to say the most important thing is actually, I believe, to start letting go of all these sleep efforts, letting go of all these attempts at trying to make yourself sleep, and just do something you enjoy. Instead of like, okay, I can't sleep, now I'm going to meditate, I'm going to try harder. You go, no, I'm going to do something enjoyable. I'm going to watch a Netflix show, Hulu show, a great book, something like that. I think is really, really helpful. And then generally, I think just education is good. Something that strikes me with this email and many others similar to it is that you learn things from a CBTI course, but sometimes I feel like the most important points are somehow not taught in the many courses, which is the whole idea of sleep efforts, the whole idea of like the more you try, the less you get, etc. Which I think, unfortunately, CBTI has become almost synonymous with like spending less time in bed, like sleep restriction, which is not at all as important as just education. So if you feel at this point, Kevin, that it's like, oh, Daniel, that's weird, what's he talking about? Doesn't really make any sense. Then I think education is the key. Browse this channel, go through the playlists, like just educate yourself till you fully understand what insomnia is about, and then you can really let go of the sleep efforts and sleep really well. Yeah, Kevin, thank you so much for this question. Sorry, the answer came in late. And see, we have Zoltan is in the house. That's awesome. Zoltan says, woo. He says, I can share this with you. I always forget that. Zoltan says, woo. Okay. And then Zoltan says, I had tinnitus in 2014 for 3 months in my right ear. Prior to that, I never had tinnitus, but now it flares up and goes away. And I have to say this, that I'm not no tinnitus expert for sure, but I can't help but note how many people have both tinnitus and insomnia, and I can't help but think that tinnitus probably does happen as a part of like hyperarousal. That when you're in this kind of anxious state, hyperarousal state, your emotional state is very high, you're in the lookout, you're in the kind of threat monitoring state, that you can notice a ringing in your ear that you wouldn't notice otherwise, and then you pay more attention to it. So I wouldn't surprise me at all if somebody said tinnitus is part of a hyperarousal, which then of course causes insomnia too. And we have a happy birthday there. Thank you so much. It was my birthday the other day. Now, Lytle says, education eased my mind for some. This is super important. I kind of only recently realized how important this is. Meaning, I've talked a lot about like sleep confidence, believe in yourself, find evidence that you can sleep, which is important. But more important than that is education, understanding what insomnia is, why you have trouble sleeping, the basic sleep physiology, and the all stuff. That is more important than anything, I now believe, because guess what? When you understand something, nobody can take that away from you. And that's why, oh, by the way, I mean to make a separate episode on this where I talk about how I believe personally that I'm immune to insomnia. I don't think I personally can get insomnia. I can have trouble sleeping for sure, but not that ongoing insomnia because I understand it. And this immunity is transferable, and it's just education. When you have this insight, education, you can no longer have insomnia. You can have trouble sleep. Everybody can that, but not ongoing. So I think education is the way to becoming immune towards having insomnia for sure. I certainly believe that. Okay, so with that said, let's jump into our next email, which is right here. And again, we have this color coding, which I used for this one too. This is a longer email. We may skip some parts. that I don't think are that important for answering this email. So let's jump in here. This is from Sam, came in 3 days ago. It was titled Questions About Sleeping Windows CBTI. And Sam says the following: Dear Daniel, I've been suffering from insomnia for a while now. I'm losing my life, and every day I'm suffering so much. I'm really sorry to hear this, Sam. My first episode of insomnia came in 2013. I was 22 at the time. I wasn't aware about mental illnesses and general anxiety disorder. I highlighted general anxiety disorder here as green, as a predisposing factor, just because having kind of like a tendency to worry is one of those things that some of us are. Some of us do tend to worry more than others, and that is just one of the things that predisposes us towards insomnia. Doesn't mean that you should have it or have to have it. Just like we saw in the previous email from Kevin, that who's sleeping well, even under a lot of stress and worry. But knowing that, you know, if you have a tendency to worry, or if you're kind of a perfectionist, you're a type A personality, you're health conscious, you're an overthinker, all those things make it more likely that you have insomnia. That just goes towards that education again. When you understand why you have trouble sleeping, it's no longer as anxiety provoking because you understand it. So I just highlight this in green just for that kind of educational purpose. And now, I developed severe anxiety. I suffered complex symptoms. I was given different medications. And here, eventually I found a psychiatrist. I was treated with citalopram and trazodone for 6 months. My insomnia vanished after that. 7 years forward, I experienced severe harassment, bullying at work. And then 3 months after that, I started a new job. I developed insomnia anxiety again when I traveled back to Vietnam to visit my family. This time I started meditation, yoga, and practiced mindfulness to cope. Eventually, 2 months later, I managed to reset my sleep pattern. Now, why I highlighted these things in yellow was the following: that insomnia, again, happens when you're worried about your sleep and you're afraid of losing sleep and you're paying a lot of attention to your sleep. And, you know, things like when you start taking the same medication, then that can be a bit sedating maybe, or you can have belief in the medication and you can start sleeping better. But then what is problematic there is it can seem like, oh, the medication made me sleep. Now I'm sleeping good. I don't need it anymore, but it made me sleep, you know, which the problematic thing there is that it feeds this notion that you have to do something in order to sleep more. Same thing with the last one here. I started meditation, yoga, and practiced mindfulness to cope. Eventually, I reset my sleep pattern. I think those things are fantastic, actually. Meditation, yoga, and mindfulness are fantastic things, but it can also, you know, when you start practicing mindfulness and you sleep better, you can kind of get in this mindset of like, well, I have to do yoga to sleep. And that's not good, because the reason mindfulness works is the complete opposite, that it takes your mind away from thinking about sleep, and then it allows you to sleep. So those things are fantastic, but these yellow things are things that can be problematic because they, again, they can make it seem like you have to do things to get sleep, you know? I think that's an important point here. Now, going forward here, with the coronavirus pandemic, I lost my job and I had to fly back home because my home country was shutting down. I wanted to be with my family. I was sent to quarantine center for 2 weeks, going through severe anxiety and isolation. This I highlighted as a precipitating factor, something that should make you have some trouble sleeping. It's normal to have trouble sleeping when something like that goes on, like the harassment and bullying at work, like anxiety, stress. And again, like we just talked about, I'm just going to repeat myself because we just talked about it before, but having trouble sleeping when there is a obvious trigger, that is not a problem. It's when we react to that trigger and we kind of like go into this rabbit hole of like trying to sleep more. That's when it becomes a long-standing problem. So in this paragraph here, Sam talked about like he saw a psychiatrist, were put on medications, had some side effects or reactions to it. Eventually, we're taking off the medication, and then a lot of those effects subsided. I consulted another doctor. He advised me to stop the medication, and I've been drug-free for 4 weeks. Ever since then, I started to sleep better, but my sleep duration has been broken. I managed to get 4 to 5 hours of sleep every day, but I wake up every 2 hours. With practice, I have resolved my sleep onset, but I can't really stay asleep for long. I wake up every 1 to 2 hours. Right now, I'm trying CBTI. I have a question, and I wondered if you could help me. I can easily go to sleep at 10 p.m., but I will wake up 2 hours after that at midnight or 1 a.m. sometimes, and then fall asleep again until 2 or 3 a.m. I found a resource suggesting that if I don't have a sleep onset insomnia, I should try to move my wake-up time earlier and then increase the wake-up time slowly. I intended to set my wake-up time at 3 a.m. and go to bed at 10 p.m. I'm using Sleepio at the moment. Would love to hear your advice. I think we talked about some important things, and I think we can actually start off by talking about these things I highlighted in pink, which are not necessarily sleep efforts. I use the sleep effort color, but I think they are things that, these are the things that are kind of like my spidey senses off. When I hear any of these expressions, my spidey senses go like ding, 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 ding. And what the ding means is that effort. The language used here is the language of someone who is trying to sleep. I managed to get it with practice. I'm trying. I can easily, etc. It's like maybe not. Maybe the last one was not appropriate. But the other ones for sure is like it picks someone who's kind of trying to sleep, which of course you would, right? If you have trouble sleeping, you want to get more sleep. You're trying to get more sleep, but again, that always backfires. The more you try, the less you get. So a key insight for you, Sam, just as it was for Kevin, is that one, like the stepping away from trying to sleep is the key. And that's where this thing comes in also, like what you talk about here is like sleep restriction or spending less time in bed. Where I think Sleepio has it wrong is that in the course, in the Sleepio course, they talk about how the most important thing for you is sleep efficiency, which means the amount of time in bed you spend sleeping. And it's considered good if you sleep like 85% or more of the time you're in bed. So if you, for example, you're in bed 4 hours and you slept 3 hours and 40 minutes or something, then you had good sleep efficiency, which I have moved away from that thinking, because that just again implies controllability. Like when you're like, do this, do that, check your sleep efficiency, track how much you sleep. It brings too much attention to sleep, and it implies that you can control sleep, which is the whole problem. Because if you try to control sleep, you're never going to sleep well. So I think instead of like what you're thinking of doing is like getting up at 3 a.m. and going to bed at 10 p.m., which is spending just 5 hours in bed. A lot of people use that kind of technique, but I have really started thinking that it's not the best. Spending less time in bed is good, but not when it is used as like traditional CBTI, cut and dry, traditional CBTI, when it's like you gotta stay awake much longer. You're gonna really force yourself to stay awake so that you can get some sleep, because that again creates a sleep effort. You're like, I gotta stay awake, I gotta stay awake, I gotta stay awake, and then okay, now I can go to sleep, and then but I can't sleep because you were trying so hard. I think it's much better to allow yourself more time in bed, but set a wake-up time that you have no problem committing to sticking with for 4 weeks or 3 weeks or 5 weeks or many weeks at least. So I want to say if you get up at 3 a.m., the question is, what are you going to do? It's hard. I think it's much easier and better and more effective to say, I'm going to get up at 6 and I'm not going to go to bed before 11, and then just set it and forget it. Just allow yourself a wider sleep window, but just keep going with it. Patience is the key. Like, just keep going, right? That's super important. Working on sleep efforts, I think, is super important. Like getting away from trying. And other than that, I want to say, I know I'm kind of repeating myself a lot here, but education. Like browse the channel, make sure you understand why you have trouble sleeping. If there are any questions about that, let me know. But again, I want to say this one just as encouragement, because I know I know how much you've been struggling, Sam, is this one. I have never come across anyone who really wanted to sleep better, was willing to learn, unlearn, not give up, keep going, that ended up sleeping better. I've never come across anybody who just kept learning, kept educating himself, were willing to learn setup that didn't end up sleeping better. You'll get there too. Any follow-up questions, please let me know. Okay, so let's check in here with our stream, and I'm just gonna see, there was, I think, some live comments here from Zoltan. You should up Julian Cohen. He talks about hyperarousal and tinnitus. Interesting. Okay, definitely we'll check in on that, Julian Cohen. Very interesting. All right, let's move on to our next email here. This is from Luke. And Luke says the following. Hi, Daniel. I've been doing really well since I asked you a question last week. I haven't really been fully detoxing, like I said. And by the way, for those of you new to the channel, detoxing, sleep detox is when you've gotten to a point where you understand why you have trouble sleeping, you understand insomnia, you're starting to do better, and you realize that staying on this channel more, or reading more about sleep, etc., is actually not helpful for you. You know what you need to know, so you take a sleep detox. You leave the sleep universe. You don't read up on sleep. You don't educate yourself. You just like consciously don't just kind of like do a sleep detox. Read nothing, hear nothing, talk nothing about sleep. Just leave sleep for like 2 weeks or something like that, and just see how you do. And oftentimes that can be really helpful. Now, I cut down a lot on like reading up about sleep, and I found that I actually learned a lot from your videos. That I love when I read that, because again, education is the key. I feel like maybe I'll just naturally not want to watch these videos anymore once I'm feeling better and confident, but for now, they continue to change the way I view sleep. So my question, I recently started to watch TV in bed before sleep, and I've been really liking it, exclamation mark. I feel like it's making me enjoy my bed more and more. I love this sentence. When I would watch TV somewhere else before, I found that it would add pressure, that my bed is somewhere to perform rather be comfortable, and if I failed, I'd have to leave it. One thing though is that I find I'm more alert right now while doing this, rather than how to be drifting off on my couch doing the same thing at the same time. Last night, I even woke up at myself a bit before drifting back off, as if some resistance from my body. Do you think this is a normal adjustment to the change, maybe mixed with my leftover arousal from past bad experiences with the bed? Will this subside so that I can drift off like how I would on the couch? Love to hear your thoughts. I think the short answer there is like yes and yes. And yes, yes and yes and yes to those 3 ones. And I want to spend a little bit more time here, expanding on that answer. I want to say a couple of things. Oh yeah, this one. I'm feeling, for now, they continue to change the way I view sleep. Meaning, sometimes people ask me like, should I just stop tuning into your videos, Daniel? And I want to say, as long as you're learning, I say keep watching. But when you get to the point where you're like, I think I got it, then I'm not really learning anymore, then it's a good time to tune out. And to add to that, something that I learned very recently from a viewer here was this. If you leave, like, before you tune out, before you like do the forget it part where you're like, okay, I'm not gonna pay any attention to my sleep anymore and just I'm good, make sure you understand why you had trouble sleeping from the beginning. If somebody does this thing where like, I have trouble sleeping, I watched 3 of Daniel's videos and I'm spending a little bit less time in bed, oh, I feel better, oh, I'm sleeping good, and then you didn't really understand why you had insomnia and why you're sleeping better, you're still a little bit vulnerable, because then next time you have trouble sleeping, you're like, dang it, I am doing the same thing I did last time and I'm still not sleeping better. That means you still didn't quite understand it. So I think before you leave the sleep universe, or my channel or whatever you want to call it, before you kind of you do the forget it part, make sure you understand, because then you're good for life. Now, so the whole very interesting here. I started watching TV in bed. I always say that it's so important that you look forward to going to bed. If you watch TV in bed, that's completely fine in my opinion. Most people, I believe, in this day and age, watch some Netflix or Hulu, oftentimes in bed on your phone and whatnot, completely normal. As long as you look forward to going to bed, that's perfect. And what as I'm speaking now, actually, I thought this was really insightful. If you're watching bed in a couch, watching TV on a couch, purposely, because you're trying not to watch TV in bed, it can easily become this thing where you're like, okay, I'm in my couch, I'm feeling sleepy. Okay, now I got to jump into bed so I can sleep. And then it becomes this effort, like you're trying to sleep in bed, you're trying to preserve that sleepiness as you're moving into bed, and then it wakes you up because you're like, you went from being in the couch, you don't mind if you sleep, going to bed, you want to sleep. So I think that's actually a problem with not watching TV in bed. If you purposely watch TV elsewhere so that you can sleep in bed, that's very tricky. I think what you're doing, Luke, is much better. And now that said, do you think this is a normal adjustment? Completely. Absolutely. Some leftover arousal. Yeah, you're still, you're doing so much better, which is fantastic, but your brain has sleep on the radar there. It's like, it's still not completely past the fact that you had some trouble sleeping and it's still kind of monitoring for things. So yes, whenever you do change something, it will be like on extra lookout for things and completely normal. And then I think if you just if you notice this kind of like resistance from my body, you become a little bit more aroused. As long as you don't react to it and say like, okay, this is normal. I've had some trouble sleeping, and it will be a little while before I don't have any hyperarousal in bed and don't react to it again. You'll do totally fine. You will drift off just like you're on your couch in bed, and that's it. So Luke, stay in touch. Let us know how you do. And with that, I will again check if there's anything live here. Okay, this is funny. Oh my gosh. I'm happy we have Zoltan. It always cracks me up. You should smoke a cigar while you stream. Imagine that. Oh my God, that's funny. Okay, let's check out this last question, which is from Mary here. And and the title here is what to do when you're having flashbacks of sleep struggle after weeks of somehow recovering your sleep. Actually, I'm going to take a kind of a quick break there from the email and just give my standard sounds so boring, but what should I say? My most helpful. Just go. My most helpful insight when it comes to that. Let's say you have been sleeping better for 3 days, and then you have a setback, or you've been sleeping better for 2 weeks, and then you don't sleep much for 2 days, or you've been sleeping better for 6 weeks, and now for 2 weeks. Here's the thing, it's the same pattern. It's like one of the most common questions anyway I get, which is, I did better, then I had a setback, what should I do? And that's it's a very natural question, because whenever you're doing better and then have the setback, you focus on the setback and be like, I'm doing something wrong now, I should tweak something so I get back to where I were before. But in fact, it's actually the complete opposite. You should just focus on the progress and treat the setback like a hiccup. Like don't pay attention. Give the attention to the improvement. Play that up. Talk to friends. Celebrate it and be like, okay, I can do this. And then when you have that setback, just like, oh, that's a setback. I didn't sleep much. Okay, on I go. And then my favorite analogy, which a lot of you have heard like 1,000 times, is the hiking one. You want to get to a place where you're sleeping better. And you know how you do that. It's education, habit change, and you're starting to do better. And then you stumble on a rock, just like when you're doing hiking in real life. You just kind of stumble on something. And if you stop there, look at the rock, measure it, examine it, wonder why it's there, who left it there, why did I fall, how can I not fall again? Guess what? You're not moving. You're never getting anywhere. You get stuck. You get stuck at where the rock is. But if you stumble over a rock, like, oh, I stumbled over a rock, now I'm going to keep going. You'll get to where you want to go. That's my kind of big picture thing there. So let's go back into the details of this email. So Mary said, I just want you to know that things actually got better the past 14 days or so. I stopped taking melatonin for a week. And she says here later on that I was really happy because I've not experienced hypnic jerks for a while. And she said, I would listen to Martin Reed's Sleep Drive Always Win video, and it would somehow make me calm as I try to sleep. And I highlight that because Martin Reed is my good friend and colleague. And, it's one of these where like, if you're looking forward to if you're kind of looking forward to listening to that video and you don't expect it to make you fall asleep, perfect. But if you're like, that video from Martin is going to make me sleep, and it always does, and I hope then it becomes a sleep effort. So look forward to it, perfect. But make sure you're not thinking like that video is going to make me sleep, because then that's not good. Then you're trying to sleep again, and that's going to backfire. Let's see. I felt very energized. I think I didn't think this was so important, so let's skip this and we can read here. I had poor sleep because of too much noise around the house. I would wake up due to loud noise of my father. It was annoying. I think I had 7 hours of sleep all night. I struggled to sleep from midnight to 3 a.m. because it was so hot. One of our fans was not working. I managed to sleep around 3 a.m. and woke up 5 a.m. I was happy at the moment. I realized I fell asleep because I remembered my dream. Quickly went back to sleep after that. From 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. my sleep was disturbed because of the noises. Like in this paragraph here, I highlighted it because what really strikes me here is the attention to the time. Like you know exactly from what time you slept and how much, etc. Which again, you kind of want to keep track of something when you have a problem, because it feels like it gives you some sense of control, but it's really the opposite. It's when you let go of control that you sleep well. So that's one thing that really struck me here. Like, if you can get to a point where you're not so aware what time it is, you'll really do well. And the other thing was, like, I had poor sleep because of too much noise. Maybe it was a lot of noise, and in that case, it's natural that you sleep less. So then there's no concern. On the other hand, it can also be that maybe it wasn't the noise. Maybe you were just a little hyper aroused, still a little bit worried about your sleep, and then you have a little bit lighter sleep, and then the same noise that you wouldn't have paid attention to otherwise now wakes you up because you're kind of hyper aroused. And the key there is, like, to not blame the noise so much. If it's if your circumstances, so you judge what is best for you here. But if this is noise that actually is kind of often there, but it seems to bother you more now, then again, the key there is to say, actually, the noise isn't the culprit. It's kind of my own reaction to the noise and my hyperarousal, which will go away as I just kind of keep doing the things I've been doing, because you've been getting better sleep, And so, and then interestingly, as I read this lately, I was smiling when I read this part. I know that I have been putting too much attention on my sleep. Exactly. I think that's a great insight, and you writing that made me really, really encouraged. Because I have so much time during this lockdown, and I'm more preoccupied. I missed the times before the lockdown. I would not think about sleep because I was so tired from doing schoolwork, etc. So, and I think I think there wasn't actually a specific question here from Mary. It was just kind of like sharing things, and I want to say, you have insight. You know that the lockdown is causing a lot of this. That in itself is, like, it's always great when you understand that this is temporary, this is happening now. There's no mystery. That's a great one. Maybe try shifting attention away from knowing what time it is overnight. That's a great one. And in the last year, Mary said that she's been told that she has a depression and anxiety, and told to take medications. I've chosen not to take them. I don't want to depend on sleeping pills as well. I know these struggles will not remain forever. I think for anyone out there, I personally, I think Milena's here. Hey, Milena. Hi. I would say maybe 2 months ago, everything started to kind of like make sense to me. Like, why I feel like there's so much in common with insomnia, anxiety, and why, like, depression too, mental, well, all of it is kind of connected. And check out this. I have a playlist that's going to be in the description of this video. It's in the description of all the latest videos, called The Model. And the first one in that series is how I describe, like, it was a real revelation to me when I understand that the connection with all these things is that when you're trying to escape a negative emotion, like you're starting to feel anxious, and then you don't want to feel anxious, and you wonder why you're feeling anxious, and you want to try to do things to make yourself less anxious. Anxiety actually becomes a bigger part of your life, and that's when we have anxiety. In my opinion, that's when we have, like, ongoing anxiety. Same thing with sleep. Like, when you start fearing the loss of sleep, and you want to escape that fear, you want to make yourself sleep more, that's when you have insomnia. If you're really sad and you wonder, why am I so sad? I want to be less sad. I have to do things to make myself less sad. If you're resisting sadness, that's when you get more sad, etc. So I think that playlist is super important. And actually, that segues nicely into the last thing I want to say here, which is the following: that anyone out there, if you like what you hear here, but you feel like, I think I need a little bit more hand-holding, support, guidance, etc., please check out. Oh, I made a banner. Let me share it with you. Please check out our self-coaching master program. It's up and running now, and I think it's really, really good, particularly for someone who has trouble sleeping and some anxiety, because the tools there can help with anything, including anxiety. I think it's a really good program also for somebody who's like, I've tried CBTI, it didn't really work for me, I'm kind of stuck, and really, and it's good for anyone, but particularly those instances, I think it's a really good program. So check it out. So with that said, I want to thank everyone for your input, and I guess we'll answer this one for Zoltan. What is your thoughts on opinion? Well, it's the same as my opinion on thoughts, that they're extremely important. Thoughts are extremely important. Opinions are important. Myths stories we tell ourselves are so important, because like we can, it seems like thoughts are just like, they just pop in your head out of nowhere and you have no control over them. Well, it's true that you can't just be like, I'm going to control what I'm going to think. No, but you can work on your thoughts. You can work on your opinions. You can work on your beliefs. You can work on the stories you tell yourself. You can change your mind. And when that changes, everything changes. So Zoltan, I really appreciate you always being live here. Here's another one that I missed. Check this out. Shen says, sorry, Zoltan, start wearing sunglasses and leather jacket too. Yeah, I might just do that. Shen, if you have trouble falling asleep most of your life, like many sleepless nights and hard to fall asleep, is ACT or CBTI better? And how to reach the point of acceptance, especially when we already sleep deprived for so bad for. I know this is not easy for sure. I think okay. This is a great topic here. Well, what is ACTI and what is CBTI? So ACTI stands for Acceptance Commitment Therapy to Insomnia. Briefly, in kind of the ACTI philosophy is that anxiety and like anxiety-provoking thoughts are really the reason you have trouble sleeping. And if you can get to a point where you don't engage with these thoughts, when the thoughts pops up in your mind, you can detach yourself from it. Look at it from the outside, decide what to do with it and not let it affect you. That's ACTI. I think it's really very aligned with mindfulness, where you learn that, you can just observe things without engaging with them. And I think ACTI is really good, just like mindfulness is, but I think it's also oftentimes more intangible, more philosophical, less practical. There isn't that much, it's more of a practice that you develop over time, So I think for most people, even if you had trouble sleeping for a long time, CBTI is a little bit more practical and easier. So CBTI also has the more important than everything, educational component, which is like the C, and then BT, behavioral change, which is like spending less time in bed, not drastically by any means, but spending a little bit less time in bed, and changing other habits that are not helpful. So I think for most people, it makes sense to do CBTI, I think, and ACTI is also good. And by the way, here's an important thing. If you have trouble sleeping most of your life, sometimes I get the question of, why is it that it doesn't take somebody that long to get better sleep when they haven't had trouble sleeping for that long? In my opinion, that is all about like how entrenched your beliefs are. Going back to actually what Zoltan talked about here, what are your opinion and thoughts, and what are your thoughts and opinions? Thoughts are what really matter. If you've had trouble sleeping for 2 months, then that can be like, it can really affect your life, but you probably have not started thinking of yourself as an insomniac. You haven't started identifying it. You haven't gotten to a point where all your friends ask you about your sleep because they know how you trouble sleep. It hasn't become part of who you are, like an entrenched part of like your identity. But if you have trouble sleeping for like 30 years, and I say, well, guess what? It's really your beliefs that are the reason you have trouble sleeping. That person has 30 years of experience that negates what I say. And that's like, no, how can you say that? I've had trouble sleeping for 30 years. It is hard to get past insomnia that we have for decades because your beliefs are so entrenched. And this sounds bizarre, but you can even get to a point where you actually find some comfort in it. Like, you actually hold on to the insomnia because it gets you empathy from people, sympathy. It gets you something, it makes you special, you get attention, and an investment too. It can feel like I've tried so hard to get good sleep. I've tried all these things over 15 years. I've tried all these things, and you're telling me that all I have to do is like educate myself. No. I've invested. It can feel like you've invested years into this, and it can be almost like I don't want to believe it's that easy. Like this is an investment, It can seem like that. So those are the reasons why it can be really challenging when you have trouble sleeping for a long time. And now also from Chen, how to reach the point of acceptance, especially when you already sleep deprived so bad for days. I think the key to this one, in my opinion, is when you, if you think of it this way, that I'm really sleep deprived, so I really need to sleep better, and it's hard for me to kind of accept that I'm not sleeping well because I'm so sleep deprived, then you are setting yourself up for more trouble sleeping. Meaning, like, if you think I'm really sleep deprived, so I really need more sleep, then you're raising that bar. Like you're setting yourself up in a way for having more trouble sleeping. So I know this is hard, but I think getting the point of acceptance in this case is finding evidence that you can have an okay day even if you slept very little. If you search your mind, I'm sure you'll find those, even if they're kind of rare exceptions. If it's just like one time in a blue moon, and we're like, at that time, guess what? I had slept very little, but I ended up having a pretty good day. If you can just play up that evidence, find more evidence that not everything depends upon how much you sleep. The more you do that, the better you will do. Weirdly, the more you find evidence that you don't need that much sleep to feel okay, the easier sleep comes to you, and the easier it will be to reach that point of acceptance, that point of when you're in bed, it's night, and you're like, I'm not sleeping, but that's all right. I'm going to be fine. Insomnia is not going to hurt me. I'm going to be okay. That's, I think, is really the path. So stay, thanks for all the questions. I know you struggle a lot, Chen, but just stick with it. Like, ask questions and educate yourself. You do really well. And Melina says this: how do you go by people telling you that your thoughts have nothing to do with insomnia rather than something wrong with you? This kind of annoys me because working on my thoughts works for me. Okay, so when people say thoughts have nothing to do with insomnia, there's something wrong with you, that kind of annoys you. It should. I think. I think, how do you do that? I think maybe deploying empathy. Maybe thinking of it this way: that those people who say that either are just they're trying to be helpful, but they're ignorant. They don't understand. This could be like family members who are like, "What are you doing? Just take this supplement or whatnot," and be like, "Okay, I'm not going to get upset because they really don't know what they're talking about. I'm having empathy with them. They don't understand." That's to deal with those people that actually have your best interest in mind. Then you have another group of people who are the people that you find on these. Okay, exactly. That's what I thought, Milena. For example, some people that think they found the cure, they get so mad at people like you, right? So oftentimes, if you end up in like one of these like Facebook groups or Reddit groups, a lot of people on those groups actually weirdly don't want to sleep better because, again, insomnia is part of who they are, who they identify as, and it gives them a sense of community. It makes them maybe a little bit special. Something is a little bit unusual with them, and when you say that you just work on your thoughts, it's like an offensive. Like, what do you mean? Like, no, I have this thing called insomnia. It makes me special. It's something. You don't try to mess with that. That's part of who I am. Sadly, or I don't know if I should use the word sadly, but that can often happen. And that's when if they're like, they found the cure, it's milkweed, they have to take milkweed. If they don't take milkweed, they're not going to sleep. They're kind of special. Their brain is special. They need that milkweed. And you say, you don't need that milkweed. It's like, you're offending them because you're depriving them of that sense of uniqueness, that's my thought on that one. And Melina says, LOL. Okay. And then, like, oh my God, this doctor does not talk about these vitamins, so forth. That could be vitamins. What can I do? There's so much, sadly, there's so much misinformation out there, and I'm not going to talk about vitamins. I'm not going to talk about vitamins. Of course not. All right. So no, Malina, thanks so much for staying in touch. Chen, Zoltan, everybody here, Lido. and everybody's sending me emails. So, oh, by the way, last thing, that email, Daniel at insomniainsight.co, is no longer going to work. It's going to bounce. I stopped that one. So insomniainsight@gmail.com still going to work, and of course the Sleep Coach School. Questions at the Sleep Coach School that works going to work. And yep, the milkweed. It's not the milkweed. Forget about the milkweed. Chen says, you're right about after years of insomnia, it's become something stuck. It's been 4 years for me. I hear it, but just you're on the right path, Jen. You're learning, you're educating yourself, and you're here asking questions. That makes me so encouraged. You'll get there. What if I say that curing insomnia is by not? Yeah, that is, the reason I stopped saying things like the cure for insomnia or overcome insomnia or things like that is that when you say like you should do this so that you can overcome your insomnia, it implies a struggle, a fight, a battle, and that's the thing. It feels like that because you feel like I have to do all these things to sleep better, but it's only when you step away from the battle, when you're like, there is no fight, there is no enemy, there is no battle. That's when you get better. So that's why I don't say overcome insomnia. And same thing with cure. Like, I don't say the word cure insomnia because cure implies that there is a disease or disorder, which there isn't. So it is when, not curing insomnia, I mean like not thinking of it as a disorder, not thinking of it as a battle, just think of it as a misunderstanding, a little confusion in that part of your brain that's monitoring threats. That's all it is. So when curing insomnia by not curing it, yeah, that's true. It is very true. And Zoltan says, make sure you take your vitamins, y'all. Okay. And Lyle, more like this thing called stoicism. Stoicism, I think it definitely is kind of like acceptance, like mindfulness, like not non-reactivity. I think that is definitely very helpful. Active letting go, same thing there again, non-reactivity, super helpful. And Melissa says, no milkweed, no melatonin did anything for me. And the first day I slept without it was very encouraging. I love it. Absolutely, so helpful. By the way, a lot of you I know my friend Martin Reed, and he some point he started talking about milkweed, and that just stuck with me. So I hope you watch this, Martin. Milkweed is just stuck in my brain. I always talk about milkweed. Oh, Navinder is here too. Let's see. One thing that helped me is to try to copy good sleepers. For example, good sleepers don't think about sleep, so I don't either. I only sometimes check this channel. Absolutely, 100%. I think that is the key. And again, copying good sleepers. Good sleepers, guess what? Have coffee if they feel like it. Good sleepers watch some Netflix before they go to bed. Good sleepers actually don't practice sleep hygiene. They may have a bedtime ritual and do things before they go to bed, but it's not an intent, like an effort to sleep. So I think that's super important. Super important. So I love this. This has been great. I have to finish up now, but I hope to have everyone back very soon. I'm always live here 8 p.m. on Mondays Pacific time, and at 2 p.m. that potentially could change in the future, but I think for now definitely it's 2 p.m. Pacific time on Fridays, sometimes Thursdays too, but those times definitely tune in. Zoltan, Melina, Lidl, everybody else, thanks so much, and see you back soon. Bye-bye.